Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles. And let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of our faith. For the joy set before him, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. And now our second reading is found in Philippians 1:3. I thank my God every time I remember you. We give God thanks for these holy scriptures.
Good morning, church. Good to see all of you this morning. Thank you for being here. Whatever brought you through the doors, I hope and pray you'll find it in whatever way God makes it possible in a time like this. I saw something the other day that made me laugh. I got to share with you. Big movie release of Oppenheimer along with Barbie simultaneously, not only in the United States, but also internationally. So in India, they showed the movies, but they had subtitles. People who went to watch Oppenheimer were a little confused when all the dialogue was from Barbie. Can you imagine how confusing that might be to try to watch Oppenheimer and you're reading the dialogue from Barbie? There's a point to that. It just means words matter. The right words, the right time, at the right moment matter. That's why we're talking about letters. We're talking about being intentional about articulating, conveying the things that we need to say, not only for ourselves, but those who might receive them as well. Not only are words important, the absence of words are critical because they can do great harm. And so what we're doing, this whole series, is talking about something that's important. When Paul talks about, who writes the majority of letters in the New Testament, he makes this audacious claim. He said, you yourselves are letters from Christ, not written on tablets of stone, but on the human heart, that people read you. And what do they read about Christ? What do they read about you? What's inside of you? What statements do you make? Because everything in our world makes a statement. Every word you do, everything you fail to do makes a statement about who you are. And what Paul's trying to encourage us is to be intentional about being literally letters from Christ to people that we encounter. So let's bow our heads as we begin, if we could. God, let the words of my mouth and the meditations of our hearts be acceptable in thy sight. O Lord, our strength and our Redeemer. Amen. So I've been preaching for a long time. I can honestly say this. Most people don't remember sermons. It's not a bad thing. I'm not being overly critical. In fact, I'm just being realistic. People don't really remember sermons per se. And I always tell younger clergy, be careful because you think they're hanging on every word. I look at people sometimes, they're writing notes furiously, and I'm thinking, boy, they're hanging on every word. And what I realize is later I find out a note that says bread, cheese, milk, things I got to pick up from the store on my way home. Truth is, I don't always remember my own sermons. So 3 weeks ago, what did we preach on? You don't know, and neither do I, and it's okay. Because here's statistically what's happened. It's normal that people remember only 10% of what they read, 20% of what they only hear, 30% of what they only see, 50% of what they see and hear, 70% of what they say and write down, and here's the kicker, 90% people will remember of what they actually do, which is why I hope this whole series has some potential for being memorable, because we're asking you to actually do something. And there's a list as an insert before you about where this series is going, the invitation to write a letter, which is a lost art. But write a letter to specific circumstances, people, in order to understand how it reveals to us the letter we need to write. So part of what you and I have figured out, if you live long enough, that there's two primary burdens that people just carry with them for a long time, because life does that to us. The two major burdens that I see often are, one, unresolved pain, and two, unfinished business. Unresolved pain is the feeling that life just didn't go your way. You were disappointed. You were hurt. Some tragedy befell you. You never quite recovered from. Somebody betrayed you. You never really got over it. Something happened to you that hurt you deeply. It's unresolved. You didn't know how to fix it. You didn't know where to put it. You didn't know where to place it. You had no place to voice it, so you just ate it and you carry it around with you. And there's so many people in this world that just carry with them unresolved pain. And the other is unfinished business. Meaning at some point in your life, you began to sense that there were moments you should have seized, you didn't. Things you should have done that you failed to do. Opportunities that came to you that you walked away from, and you have a sense of this unfinished business, that I didn't do this at the time that I had. And maybe because unfinished business, you convince yourself that you're always going to have time, but there are things that you want to say and things that you want to do, and then you realize you thought you had more time, you needed more time, until the time came when you realized you had no more time. Unresolved pain, unfinished business, it leaves us empty. Leaves us feeling this sort of hole in our souls, in our spirits about what we can do, which is why I'm inviting all of us to consider writing a letter. You have multiple opportunities. You can pick and choose. You can write a letter to all of them. I just want to bring up opportunities for us to do something about this unresolved pain and this unfinished business. So we're talking today in particular, we talked last week about a letter to a friend. Today we're talking about a letter to someone who's no longer with us. And I want you to sort of think back over the course of your life of a particular person or people, whoever blessed you, whoever guided you, nurtured you, who showed you the way, pointed in the way, who led by example, who taught you faith, who taught you and opened doors in ways that nobody else could, who loved you unconditionally. That without them, you wouldn't be the person you are today. You think about that person, and maybe it's your mother or your father, your brother, your sister, your child, whatever it was, your teacher, mentor. You go down the list. There's somebody that if they weren't a part of your life, it'd be fundamentally different. They gave something to you. They were a fundamental part of the formation of your life, your character, your future. And you all can look back now and you can realize just how important they become. And some of those names and faces will come to you, and with it will come a mixture of pain and sadness, but also of genuine gratitude of how blessed you have been, because some of those people are no longer with us. And so we're invited to remember. In the Bible, I don't know that you can find very many places where it doesn't have some reference to remembering. In fact, it's crucial. Over and over again, this call to remember out of the Old Testament and the New Testament. When the children of Israel finally cross over the Jordan River into the Promised Land, what's the first thing they do? Build a monument, put some stones together. Why should we put stones together? So when your children ask what happened here, you'll tell them that God led us out of slavery. And God brought us to this place. And God is in the midst of everything. We don't want to ever forget that. And so we put something here to remind us and future generations, because it's so crucial to remember. When Jesus gathered around his own disciples, the people he loved more than anyone else in this world, spent more time with, he had one final meal. What did he say? Do this in remembrance of me. What does Paul say? I thank my God for the remembrance of you. So why is its emphasis in the Bible about remembering? It's because we're human. We already know this. We forget. We forget too quickly, forget too easily. We forget who we are. We forget where we came from. We forget the struggles that we had to go through. We forget the people who came before us, who paved the way, who made sure that we could go forward in our lives. We forget how we got here. We forget that God is at the center of everything and how to connect the dots. So remembering is the essence of the Bible. Remember the mighty acts of God. Remember how God was at work in your life. It's not an abstract conversation you have in a classroom sitting around the table. It's a moment where you go, I don't know how else to explain it. When I needed God the most, God showed up, and nobody can convince me otherwise. To remember those folks who came before us. And the Bible has a particular word for them. We call them saints. And if you think saints are the venerated people who are perfect, who did extraordinary things, the original context of saints is the ordinary people who do extraordinary things because they have God in their life, because they have faith in their hearts. Saints are imperfect, flawed human beings. Remember the saints who have gone before us. Don't forget to remember. Remember to remember is what the Bible says over and over again. And so you find this passage in Hebrews that Sharon just read, and it's talking about this great cloud of witnesses. And you have this almost visual, tangible understanding of these people that surround us even after they have passed. They stay with us. They remain with us. They're encouraging us. We build upon the foundation. We hear their voices and sense their presence, and we gather from them strength that we didn't have for ourselves. We remember those things. And I love the roll call in Hebrews. And if you're really looking for saints who are perfect, don't look for Hebrews, because Hebrews will list off everything. Abraham, Moses, Samson, even Rahab, all the people, none of them were perfect, but they were faithful. And they heeded the word of God, and they moved forward because they felt God calling them to go where they were called to go and do what they were called to do. And so when Hebrews is written, church is struggling. People are sort of beginning filled with doubt. They're losing strength. They're losing focus. They're losing heart. And so Hebrews is a letter to them to say, don't give up. Don't give in. Don't lose the faith. Keep the faith. Keep fighting. Look at all the people who sacrificed greatly to get you here. They're going to be generations after you. They're going to look back and to see that you were one who stood in the gap. They continued that as well. And Hebrews is a call to remember those folks who came before us so that you would find some sense of strength in them. So it's a sacred act of remembering. And it took me a long time to really come to this understanding. Because always we talk about remembering, and I've shared with some of you this, but remembering, what's the opposite of remember? It's to forget. That's what everybody knows. It's not actually it. The opposite of remember, and look at the word remember, okay, is to put back together that which life is torn apart. Remember, put it back together, torn from us. When Jesus talks about in remembrance of me, takes bread and he tears it apart. This is my body broken for you. And every time we remember, we put pieces back together. Every time we remember the person that I hope you're thinking about, when you think about somebody who's no longer with us, it somehow defies logic because it brings back that which death took from us. In a moment you remember, and they become alive again, and they become a part of you again, and you can hear their voices again. One of the great traditions we have in the church is All Saints Sunday, and I'm always moved by it. The reading of the names, the tolling of the bells, and on the screens, the images of the saints who passed away in the last year. And you look, and every single one of them were loved. They fought hard. They built families. They walked through this world as best they could. They stumbled, they fell, got up again and moved forward. And you began to sort of see this roll call. And you see the images scrolling across, and there's not a single person at some point that doesn't think, I'm going to be up there one day and my name is going to be read and my picture will be shown. And I hope and pray that I've done something to help the people that I've left behind. I hope I've left this world a better place than I found it. I hope I give healing to people. And it's this incredible roll call, and I don't know how to explain it, but we know they're no longer with us, but in this sort of understanding of our Christian faith, they are still with us. And what we want to say at the end of the roll call is all present and accounted for. Yes, you're very much with us. Even as you are in heaven, you are in earth with us as well. We call them sometimes balcony people. It's a term coined a long time ago by Carlisle Marney. It's the idea that people are up there just cheering for us, encouraging us, watching over us, helping us to persevere, to run the right and good race, to get up and move again when we stumble and fall. I do a lot of funerals, and every once in a while I have to just stop, because if you're not careful, they can become perfunctory, because we all know how to do funerals, but I have to stop and think, do we really believe the words that we're saying? I mean, is any of this real? Or are they just sort of platitudes? Do we just get up and say things that sort of sound good, but do we really have a deep conviction? Because this is as personal as it ever gets. Do we really believe this stuff? Do we really believe this person that we've lost is going to be in heaven and we'll see them again? Do we really believe that Jesus rose from the dead? Do we really believe, we talk about the Apostles' Creed, that he ascended into heaven? Is that really true for us? Or is it just wishful thinking? Do we ever sense that we're really going to see our loved ones again? And if we really believed it, what difference would it make? It would make an incredible difference, because you know you would see that person again, and you know you'd be reunited. and you'd spend the rest of your life giving thanks and trying to live a life worthy of what they gave to you. Do we really believe there is a heaven? When you look for descriptions of heaven in the Bible, and boy, a lot of people talk about it, there's not much information in the Bible about heaven. I don't know if you knew that or not. Paul uses these sort of vague descriptions. Behold, I hand you a mystery. What no eye has seen, no ear heard, nor heart conceived, what God has prepared for those who love him. It's kind of vague, but he assures you there is this place. But it's a mystery beyond our own comprehension. The question is not what is there in heaven. I think the question is who is there? Because if you actually died and went to a place and everybody you ever loved and lost weren't there, how could it possibly be heaven? We remember those who came before us and those who are no longer with us. And I don't know about you, but it's the oddest things that bring them back to our mind. It's a song you hear and suddenly you feel their presence. You open up a closet and see a pair of old shoes. You pull out a drawer and you see an old photograph. You just something that reminds you of that person. And it just puts a lump in your throat and a tear to your eye because you feel, yes, you've lost them, but they're still somehow with you in ways that you can't understand. In the Celtic tradition, many of you already know this, is they talk about thin places, this little veil that just separates heaven and earth. It's so thin you could literally reach your hand across on earth and reach into heaven. And the thin places in our lives is when that happens. That's when a lump in your throat comes because you feel heaven and earth so close together, you could almost touch it. You can certainly feel it. So we're asking and inviting you, if you want, to write a letter to somebody who is no longer with you. So how do you actually do that? How do you actually write to someone who is so special to you, who is no longer with you? All I can say, it may be the most important letter you'll ever write, also maybe the hardest letter you'll ever write. Because what do we say to somebody who's no longer with us? It's not a conversation, it's a monologue. We're saying something to somebody, and we're not sure if they can hear us or not. But I want you to think about the one who you miss dearly, your father, your mother, your husband, brother, son, daughter, whatever it may be, the ones that you loved deeply and you miss terribly. What do you want to say to them? Where would you find the words to say what you want them to know? And all I will tell you that if you actually decide to sit down and write a letter, I can promise you two things. One, you won't regret it, because I think and I believe strongly it'll bring you a measure of peace and strength that's going to surprise you. I also think you're going to be more grateful after you've done it. More grateful for them living than the sadness you feel and the grief you have for losing them. So how would you even write a letter like this? I think you start with Paul's words. I thank my God for the remembrance of you. And the rest begins to flow. I think if I were going to write a letter, and I have, I would start with thank you. Thank you for being there for me. Thank you for being the person that I've loved, for the lessons you taught, the memories you made, for the experiences we shared, for the faith you gave, for the strength, the life you lived. I would say thank you. I would also say forgive me if there's anything that I've done, intentionally or unintentionally, or neglectfully, with a flawed human being that we all are, just to say, forgive me. And if it's the right context, I forgive you for being an imperfect person like all of us, who may have done the best they could, but occasionally fell short of what we hoped for. I would say I'm so grateful for you, and I would begin to think of the things I'm so grateful for. I would talk to them about these specific times in which they may not even know how much they meant to me and what they did for me, and I want them to know that, and I would write, I'm so grateful. And I would say, I remember the time when you, and then whatever it is that flows from you. I would tell them that I miss them, and I have. And I would tell them I love you, and I've done that. So once it's been written, and you've got that letter, and it's taken you several drafts just to get it right, what do you do with it? It's an odd conversation. Primarily, it's up to you. If you want, you can store it away somewhere in a safe place. You could keep it in a drawer. You could put it in a box. You could bury it, which I have done with other people who've written letters, and we've had a little ceremony where we took it and buried it in the ground. I've had people who will burn it, take the ashes and spread them somewhere else. I've had people who will tie a letter to a helium balloon and release it up into the heavens, hoping and trusting somehow the message gets across. Or you could drop it off in the mail. I wouldn't recommend it. But there's a little girl named Meredith Scrivener who did just that, 4 years old. It's her first experience with something that she loved very much that died. It's a 14-year-old dog named Abby. She's 4 years old. She wants God to take care of Abby, ensure that God will recognize Abby, wants to make sure that he would be there. So she tells her parents that she wants to write a letter to God, so her mother listens to her as she transcribes this letter to God. They drop it off in Brook Hollow, Texas, near San Antonio. They don't think anything of it. 2 weeks later, they get a package on their doorstep. They open up the package, and it says, "From God and one of his angels." Inside is a book by Fred Rogers. Yes, that Fred Rogers, Mr. Rogers. The book is called When a Pet Dies. But there's also a note, and it's from God. And here's what it says. "Dear Meredith, Abby arrived safely in heaven. Having the picture was a big help. I recognized Abby right away. Abby isn't sick anymore. Her spirit is here with me, just like it stays in your heart. Abby loved being your dog. Thank you for the beautiful letter, and thank you for your mother for helping you write it and sending it to me. What a wonderful mother you have. I picked her especially for you. I send my blessings every day, and remember that I love you very much. By the way, I'm easy to find. I am wherever there is love. Love God." Maybe the hardest letter, also maybe the most important letter you ever write. For those of us who are no longer with us, part of this is biblical. Part of it is factual. Some of it is speculative. All of it is hopeful. So help me answer some questions, and I invite you to do the same thing. Are they still watching over us? The people who have gone before us? Absolutely yes. Are they still with us? Answer is yes, in ways that surprise us. Are they still in us? Answer is yes, very much so. Their imprint is embedded in us. Their influence still we carry with us. Are they still encouraging us, guiding us, and cheering for us? Go back and read Hebrews, a cloud of witnesses. Strong sense of yes, they are there, encouraging us, praying for us. Will we see them again? Not a shred of doubt in our minds that we will. Can they bring us peace? Or can they help us heal our pain? Can they still show us the way forward? Yes. And the last question is, do they really know how we feel about them? How much we love them and how much we actually miss them? The answer is, I don't know. So why would I leave it to chance? Which is why it's time to sit down and write a letter so they will know before we see them again.